Once the past takes hold, it requires an iron grip and a steady heart to steer toward a better future. Watch the gripping struggles of those who fought to break free from their own history. Subscribe now and learn the true power of a spirit that refuses to stay down.
I built my architecture firm without a single favor from my family. Not one referral, not one loan, not one, "I believe in you." What I did get every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every awkward Easter dinner where my aunt made her dry ham and everyone pretended it was fine, was a variation of the same sentence. You're going to burn yourself out chasing something that isn't meant for women like you. Women like me. I used to turn that phrase over in my head on the drive home. What kind of woman was I, exactly? The kind who stayed up until 2 in the morning learning structural load calculations because she couldn't afford to hire someone who already knew them. The kind who took on a strip mall renovation in her first year because it was the only project anyone would give her and treated it like it was the Louvre. I never quite figured out what they meant, but I kept driving home and I kept working, and eventually I stopped going to Easter altogether. My father is the kind of man who fills a room without meaning to. Not because he's warm, he isn't, particularly, but because he has this way of assuming that whatever space he walks into already belongs to him. He built his career in commercial real estate the old-fashioned way, handshakes, golf courses, and a network of men who all went to the same 3 universities and some are in the same 2 states. He did well. He still does well. And for most of my childhood, that success was the ceiling I was supposed to press myself flat against, close enough to benefit from, never tall enough to exceed. My brother Ryland is 4 years older than me and has worked alongside my father since he was 23. He has my father's handshake and my father's golf game and my father's complete certainty that the world was organized specifically for his convenience. When I told my family I was leaving my position at a firm downtown to start my own practice, Ryland laughed. Not meanly, exactly. More like he genuinely thought I'd said something absurd, the way you laugh when someone mispronounces a common word. "You don't have the capital," he said. "I'll get it," I said. He shook his head like I was a child who'd announced she was going to fly. That was 7 years ago. I'm not going to pretend those 7 years were some kind of montage. They weren't. The first year, I worked out of a shared office space with a broken radiator and a neighbor who took calls on speakerphone. I lost 2 clients in 6 months because I couldn't yet afford the software their previous firms used, and I had to call them both personally to explain, which was one of the more humbling experiences of my adult life. I ate a lot of peanut butter. I learned things the hard way about contracts, about subcontractors, about what happens when you trust someone's word over a signed document. I made mistakes and I fixed them, and I made different mistakes and I fixed those too. By year 3, I had a small team. By year 5, we'd completed a medical clinic, 2 mid-rise residential buildings, and a public library branch that won a regional design award I still have sitting on my desk because I'm not above that kind of thing. By year 7, the firm had 14 employees, a reputation for coming in on budget and on time, and an office on the 14th floor of a building in the business district. A building I owned. That last part I hadn't told my family. I hadn't told most people, honestly. The acquisition had come together quietly, through a holding company my attorney helped me structure, and I'd had my reasons for keeping it that way. When you grow up in a family like mine, you learn early that information is leverage, and leverage shared is leverage lost. I wasn't hiding it out of shame. I was keeping it because I knew, the way you know certain things about the people you grew up with, that someday it would matter. I didn't know someday would be a Thursday afternoon in March, with 8 people in my conference room and my father standing in my doorway like he owned the place. He didn't knock. That was the first thing. My assistant Willa, who is 26 and has the unflappable energy of someone who has seen everything twice, appeared behind him with an expression that told me she had tried to stop this and been overruled by sheer audacity. Ryland was behind my father. So was my mother, which surprised me, because my mother usually positions herself as a bystander to these kinds of things, someone who happened to be nearby when the damage occurred. I was mid-sentence with my clients, a developer named Frank and his project lead, a woman named Sabine, both of whom had flown in from out of state that morning. Across the table sat 2 members of my team, my structural consultant and a financing contact. We had been 40 minutes into a 2-hour meeting. "We need to speak with you," my father said, addressing the room as much as me. I felt something go very still inside me. Not fear. Something colder than fear. The part of me that had been preparing for this moment for 7 years, maybe longer, straightening up. "This is a client meeting," I said. "I'll be available after 4. "It can't wait until 4. Frank glanced at me. Sabine looked at the ceiling with the polite neutrality of someone deciding whether to be offended. I stood. "Give me 1 moment," I said to the table, and I walked to the door and pulled it almost closed behind me. In the hallway, my father handed me an envelope. Inside was a document several pages, stapled, with the name of a law firm I didn't recognize at the top. "We've had some conversations," he said, "as a family, about where things stand." I read the first page, then the second. It was a demand, not a request, a demand that I restructure my firm's equity to grant 30% to Ryland and 15% to a family trust my father controlled, 45% total. The language was formal, but the reasoning was not. It cited my father's foundational influence on my career, my mother's sacrifices, and Ryland's parallel industry expertise that had supposedly contributed to my success in ways that deserved recognition. None of it was true. Not one word of it. "This isn't a conversation," I said. "This is extortion." My father's jaw tightened. "It's a family arrangement. You've benefited from our name for years." "I spent 7 years making sure I didn't have to." Ryland stepped forward. He had his hands in his pockets, and he was doing the thing he does where he tries to look reasonable while saying unreasonable things. "Look, we're not trying to make this ugly, but Dad has connections in this district. He knows the leasing office that manages this building. One call, and they start looking at your certificate of occupancy, your permits, your—" "Call them," I said. Ryland blinked. "What?" "Call them right now." I reached into my jacket pocket and set my phone on the side table in the hallway, screen up. "I'll put it on speaker." My father looked at me the way he used to when I was 12 and said something he hadn't expected, like he was recalculating. "Vivienne," my mother said quietly. It was the first word she'd spoken. "Mom," I looked at her. "I'm not signing anything, but if Dad wants to call the building management, I'd genuinely like to hear that conversation." There was a pause. My father took out his phone. He made a show of it, scrolling, finding the number, holding my gaze while he brought it to his ear. I kept my expression neutral. I had practiced neutral for a long time. 3 rings, then a voice I recognized. "Caldwell Property Group, this is Len." Len had been with the management company since before I finalized the acquisition. He knew my voice and I knew his, and he was thorough and professional, and exactly the kind of person who does not say imprecise things. My father introduced himself, gave his name, mentioned his firm, said he had concerns about a tenant in the building and wanted to discuss the lease. Len asked for the suite number. My father looked at Ryland. Ryland looked at me. I said nothing. My father gave the floor 14th in the suite. There was a brief pause on the line. "Sir," Len said, and I could hear him choosing his words with care, "that suite is the registered office of Harlow Design Group. The lease for that space and for several others in this building is held by the primary ownership entity." "Right," my father said, "and I'd like to speak with someone in that ownership office about—" "The ownership entity for this building," Len said, "is a holding company called Westmere Partners LLC. If you have concerns, I can forward them, but I'm required to tell you that correspondence regarding building operations ultimately goes to the principal of that LLC." Another pause. "Her name is Vivienne Harlow." The hallway was very quiet. My father lowered the phone. I picked mine up from the side table. "Thank you, Len," I said. "I'll follow up with you this afternoon." "Of course, Miss Harlow. Have a good meeting." I ended the call and put my phone back in my pocket. My father was looking at me the way I'd imagined he might look, in the scattered moments over the years when I'd let myself imagine this, not with rage, exactly, but with something that might have been its deflation. The certainty gone out of his posture all at once, like air from something that had been held too tightly. Ryland said, "You own the building." "Yes." "You never—" "No," I said. "I didn't." My mother had pressed her fingers to her mouth. I didn't look at her for long because I didn't trust what I would feel if I did. "I need to go back to my meeting," I said. "Willa will show you out." Willa, who had materialized at the end of the hallway with the timing of someone who had been listening from a careful distance, nodded once. I went back into the conference room, closed the door, and sat down. Frank looked at me, Sabine looked at me, my team looked at me. I'm so sorry for the interruption, I said. Where were we? Sabine said, Structural Specifications, Section 4. Right, I said. Section 4. And we finished the meeting. What I didn't do that afternoon was celebrate or cry or call anyone. I sat at my desk after everyone had gone and looked out at the city for a while, which is something I do sometimes when I need to remember why I built what I built here, and not somewhere else, somewhere easier. What happened next took a few weeks to fully unfold, and I want to be honest about it because I think the honest version is more useful than the clean one. My father did not take it quietly. I had not expected him to. He has a network, as Ryland mentioned, and he used it not to attack my permits or my certificate of occupancy, obviously, because he had just learned in a fairly definitive way that he had no leverage there, but to whisper. That's the word for it. He whispered into the professional community we both occupy, small suggestions that my firm had gotten preferential treatment, that my acquisition hadn't been entirely above board, that there were questions worth asking. He was careful. He'd been doing this kind of thing for 40 years, and he knew how to be careful. What he hadn't accounted for was that I had been building my own network for 7 years, and that the people in it had watched me work. My attorney, a woman I have trusted since year 2 when she caught a clause in a contractor agreement that would have cost me everything, sent a formal letter to my father's firm within 72 hours of my learning what he was doing. The letter was calm and precise and outlined in clear legal language what defamation looks like and what remedies exist for it. The whispering stopped. Ryland called me 6 days after the hallway. I almost didn't answer. I picked up on the 4th ring, not because I'd forgiven anything, but because I was curious. He said, I didn't know you owned the building. I know you didn't. Dad said it would work. A pause. He said you'd sign because you wouldn't want the embarrassment. He's known me for 31 years, I said. That's a strange thing to believe. Ryland was quiet for a moment. Then, I'm sorry, Viv. I shouldn't have been there. I believed him, which surprised me. I'm still not sure what to do with that. My mother texted me 3 weeks later, not a call, a text, which is how she handles things she isn't ready to say out loud. It said, I should have said something in that hallway. I didn't. I'm sorry. I read it twice and then I put my phone down and I went back to the drawings I was reviewing. I haven't responded yet. I'm not sure what the right response is or whether there is one. Some doors take longer to figure out than others. My father has not contacted me. As for the legal piece, because I saw the comments, I know that's what people want to know. My attorney reviewed what happened and confirmed that what my father and Ryland did in that hallway met the threshold for extortion under state law. Whether to pursue it is my decision, and I haven't made it yet. I'm aware that a formal case would cost time and money and emotional bandwidth that I could spend on other things. I'm also aware that we didn't get caught is not the same as what we did was acceptable. I'm sitting with that. What I can tell you is what I've learned, which is this. The people who told me I would fail were not neutral observers. They had a stake in it. If I failed, the hierarchy made sense. If I failed, they didn't have to examine what they'd withheld or what they'd said or why. My failure would have been convenient for everyone who had ever made a comfortable assumption about what I was capable of. I didn't fail. And on the day they walked into my building and tried to take something that was never theirs, I watched my father make a phone call to a man who works for me in a building I own, on a floor I lease to my own company, and I felt something I don't have a clean word for. Not triumph, exactly. More like completion, like something that had been wound up tight for a long time, finally, slowly, releasing. I have a team of 14 people who show up every morning and do extraordinary work. I have clients who come back and send referrals. I have a building. I have the design award on my desk that I'm still not above keeping there. I built all of it, dollar by dollar and decision by decision and year by year, in a shared office with a broken radiator on my own. Nobody gave me that, and nobody gets to take it. There's a moment I keep coming back to. Not the phone call. Not Len's voice saying my name on speaker. Not the look on my father's face when the air went out of him. The moment I keep returning to is earlier than all of that. It's me, 24 years old, driving home from Easter dinner with my aunt's dry ham sitting in my stomach and my father's word sitting somewhere harder to name. Thinking, women like you. Thinking, what kind of woman am I exactly? I know now. I'm the kind who finds out by doing. What happened in that hallway didn't come from luck or timing or some dramatic turning point where everything clicked. It came from 7 years of decisions that nobody saw, the contractor clause my attorney caught in year 2, the strip mall renovation I treated like it mattered because it did. The acquisition I structured quietly because I'd learned that information shared too early is just ammunition handed to the wrong people. Every one of those choices was a brick. You don't always know what you're building while you're laying them. You just keep going because stopping feels worse. My father is a smart man. That's the part people don't expect me to say. He built something real over 40 years, and he did it through discipline and strategy and a genuine understanding of how power moves through a room. What he got wrong, what he has always gotten wrong about me, is that he assumed his way of doing things was the only architecture worth learning. He saw me leave and thought I was wandering. He didn't consider that I might be building. Ryland called to apologize, and I believed him, which surprised me more than I expected. That's the thing about people you grew up with. Even when they disappoint you, they can still do something that lands as true. I'm not sure where we go from here. I'm not sure we go anywhere. But I'm not carrying it the way I once might have. What I want to say, the thing I actually believe sitting here now, is that the outcome wasn't punishment. It wasn't the universe settling a score, it was just consequence. My father made a choice to walk into my building and demand something that wasn't his, and the consequence of that choice was that he had to hear on speakerphone in front of my assistant and my clients and my brother and my mother that the ground he thought he was standing on belonged to me. That's not justice delivered from somewhere above. That's just what happens when you act without knowing the full picture. Choices land somewhere. They always do. I think about integrity a lot, not the word, which has gotten soft from overuse, but the actual thing, the way it holds its shape when nobody's checking. The years when I was working in that office with the broken radiator, nobody was grading me. Nobody gave me credit for learning the structural calculations or fixing the contract mistakes or calling those 2 clients personally when I'd fallen short. I did those things because they were the right things and because I couldn't build something real on a foundation I didn't trust. The intelligence I'm most proud of isn't the acquisition or the strategy or any single clever move. It's the accumulation of paying attention to contracts, to people, to what my father would eventually try to do, and being ready. And the persistence. 7 years is a long time to keep going when the people who raised you have decided you won't make it. There were days that were genuinely hard. Not cinematic hard, just quiet, grinding, Tuesday afternoon hard, where nothing was failing dramatically but nothing was easy either. I kept going anyway. Not because I was fearless, because I decided the alternative wasn't acceptable. Vivienne Harlow built her firm without $1 from her family. She built it without their belief. She built it, it turned out, in a building that was hers. Nobody gave her that, and that's exactly why nobody could take it.